We know when our phones buzz that we're live.
That's right.
Oh, something does.
Right. Bing. All right. Welcome, everybody, to Live Coding Happy Hour, where three ServiceNow nerds get together on a Friday afternoon and we talk about coding and ServiceNow, and we drink beer while we do it. I am Dave Slusher. With me are Chuck Tomasi and Josh Nerius. I'm going to give you a quick overview. Live Coding Happy Hour is something we do on Friday afternoons, Eastern Time. We're probably due for a morning one for Europe and India and Asia sometime in the next couple sessions. We get together. We don't prepare a demo per se. We sit here and we kind of struggle with an issue kind of live because we came to the conclusion that the act of figuring out what you're doing is a large portion of the job. So that's what we're doing. So let's give the longer bio, starting with Josh.
Yeah, and so I'm Josh Nerius. I am a developer evangelist or advocate, depending on what I'm doing that day. Here at ServiceNow, I work in the developer program. If you go to developer.servicenow.com, we always like to throw that out there. And yeah, so I'm actually really happy. I have been driving the last couple of weeks. We've been doing a bunch of stuff on integrations, and we're getting away from integrations today. So I'm pretty excited to see what we're doing today.
All right, and Chuck.
Hi, I'm Chuck from ServiceNow. I am a senior technical product marketing manager for the Now platform, and having all kinds of fun. I get to hang out with you guys again on Friday afternoon. So very happy that I've made this new job transition. That is about a month ago, and it permits me the opportunity to learn and share, which are two of the things I love doing most in my job forever.
All right, and I'm Dave Slusher. Also, I work with Josh. We are developer advocates. We're in the platform business unit, which actually is important because we don't actually report up through marketing, which is part of how we get to do basically stuff like this more so than we don't do a lot of outbound selling. This is why I've started calling myself advocate, because one of the main distinctions is whether it's inbound or outbound. And we do really mostly inbound stuff, right? I don't have to sell anyone on ServiceNow. Other people have done that for me. And frankly, the platform does an excellent job of selling itself. So before we do that, let's go around the horn with what we're drinking, starting with Chuck.
I have a new one. I have Barrio Blonde Ale. Sorry, the can's a little tough to read. At the bottom. This is a blonde ale. We'll see how it goes.
And Josh?
I've got what does that actually say? It says Laser Snake. It's from Three Floyds. It's a Three Floyds IPA.
Nice artwork.
It's got some serious artwork on it. It's actually shiny. I don't want to throw this bottle away.
Except we drink at Dragon Con.
And I am drinking the opposite of a new beer. I'm drinking a fine Purple Haze from Abita. This is
old friend.
Quite possibly the very first craft beer I ever had. I went to grad school, University of Louisiana, and Abita Springs is between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. And at the time where I first had this, which we're talking like 96-ish, craft beer was not
old enough to drink.
It had not proliferated the way it is now. And so I don't think at the time they even bottled it. So you had to live like within 150 miles of Abita Springs if you wanted to get this. So this is like an old friend to me. And I'm looking quite forward to cracking this and having it. So, okay. Preamble over. Let us get to the real stuff. And so what we're doing this time, going to disclaim, like the standard Live Coding Happy Hour disclaimer is, we may or may not get to something working. We may or may not get done in 60 minutes. Sometimes we go a little over, a little under, depending on, if we get to a good stopping point. This time we are doing something that's really kind of on the fringe of weird. And so this has a greater chance of like getting to nothing than typically what we do. Like Josh, in a lot of these integration-y things, we're not so sure how it's going to go, but within 20 minutes, we've got something wiggling, right? I don't know how it's going to go. And so we're going to start a little bit in media res because I did do there's some boilerplate code here. So let me go ahead and start my screen share. And so rather than starting at the absolute very, very beginning, which I thought might be a tad on the boring side because there's a certain amount of helper functions that needed to exist, and I just thought I would get a little bit of that done prior to us convening here. All right, and so you guys let me know when you can see my screen.
Got it.
And I'll just show you what I'll show you what I have done to this point. I've just created, so I'm doing this in global scope. solely because I wanted to. I want to avoid any kind of API weirdness. Like this kind of utility that I'm doing here doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have in a scoped app. It really is kind of a global utility that's going to reach into stuff. So I decided to put it in global space. And so this is probably like the vast majority of what we're going to do may end up being this one script include. Okay. So probably there may be a UI action or something else that we hook up to it, but pretty much all the logic is going to live in here. And so what I've got here is just a set of fairly small functions that I have been writing. So we're going to need to look up a lot of stuff from the system. And so I created a generic get system object. Again, naming things, one of the hard things. So you just pass it a table in the sysid, and it will instantiate that table in the sysid and look it up, like a completely generic little function, okay? You'll note down here that I got get a form. And so this is the notion, is that I'm going to assemble, and so you say get a form, you pass it a sysid, and then now I'm passing in the sysui form. So just so that we can make it a little more, I didn't want to write that same code over and over in each one of these things, so I'm kind of trying to factor it down into the simplest stuff. Then conversely, and I could probably order these functions a little more sensibly. They're sort of here in the order. They're basically where my cursor was when I wrote it. That's how these things are ordered.
Yeah, that's all right.
Create system object, which is more or less the reverse of that. It's a completely generic creation of a record. Okay, so you pass it a table and a JSON object of values. It will iterate over it'll iterate over the keys of the hash. Get a key value. It'll do a glide record set value for each one of those things. It'll do an insert. Note that I did new record. I do actually want the default values for everything that I'm creating this way. So I do not want to use initialize. This was our tech tip from Tech Now 6 months ago or something. So new record is what I want. If there is a default value, I want that to exist. And then I just insert it, return the sysid. Okay. So then you'll see, and then I did another one where one of the things we're going to need is a get step config by name. And so I just wrote a little query for that, kind of self-explanatory. And this is the beginning of the real work, is I created a little function. And so everything that I'm going to do through the course of today is something like this. We're going to basically build this up very small function by very small function and see how far we can get. The ultimate goal would be to say something where we can say, given this form, I'm going to start with a form. We might use other objects later, but given this form, I want to create a test based on the form. I want to create kind of the boilerplate test steps that you're going to have. If you work with ATF for any length of time, you'll realize that you set up the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, it's the same story every time.
Same thing. And so you can create a test, and you can start creating, you can copy a test and create from there. I'm basically trying to do this inside out. I wanted to introspect that from the form. And so ultimately what I want to do with this is have it create the basic test steps for testing a form, putting every single visible field on there. And so it's much easier to remove things off of there than it is to add them on there. So you'll get this default templated test with all the test steps, and you'll go in and set the values to what you want, and then you'll just remove all the ones you want. And
well, hang on, Dave. I gotta dig into your logic a little bit. If get system object is getting the whole glide record, is it not?
Yes.
Okay. Everything you need about the form is not in sysui form. It's on a related list of sysui element.
Yeah, right. This is not sufficient to do.
Okay. That. Okay. I just wanted to double check this. Okay.
Yeah. This is just one of many things that will have to exist.
All right.
So some of these things will involve like walking relation tables. We're going to have to do that on form. We're going to actually have to do the same thing on, we're going to have to do a similar type logic on the steps. And so I spent a fair amount of time last evening looking at, let me pull up kind of what I was doing. I've got a bunch of XML exports where I just created a thing called reverse engineer test and added a few test steps, and I just to kind of walk the relationships amongst these things.
Okay.
So where it's going to get, just to preview, where it's going to get really weird is when we get down into some of these steps where you'll notice the sys variable value is in here. That's where it's going to be.
Where you're inserting like the user from step 1 or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some of those things will be a little, that's when it's going to get a little hairy. I don't know if we're going to make it that far today. We'll just see.
Okay.
I can tell you that one of the things that create test does in fact work. Get rid of that thing because as you can see here, test from script, that was what I created about an hour ago, and it did in fact create that. So we're this far that I can create a test from this. It does in fact create it. So now the next thing I want to do is create the test step configs. So that's what I was doing like right before I had to go walk the dog before this, is I wanted to get the step config by name. And I did just test that, and that works. So again, this is that very simple query, because what I want to do is be able to come over here and look at so these step configurations. I want to just be able to say, give me an impersonate, give me a load, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So what I want to do is, I think what I want to do is create a simple thing, which is, and I'm trying to have a nice create test steps. I'm trying to keep this sensible
without getting redundant.
Well, so create is going to be, every time I'm inserting something, it's going to be a create. It's going to be creates, gets, and I think everything in here is a creator.
So somewhere you want to define what your standard steps are, or do you not? Start with impersonate and then go to this other one, and
that's what I'm going to do in here. And so what I'm going to do is test ID. So given a test, so that's kind of like the test, and also the note too. We're returning the sys. So I don't have I maybe need something like I maybe need a nice convention like GR here that indicates that it's returning. In fact, maybe I'll do that right now. Is that GR indicates that it's returning a glide record.
Fair enough. That one does.
Yeah, I like that pattern. That's something I've started to do, because I got in this habit where some of the time I'll return the one thing and sometimes I'll return the other thing, and then I can never remember, is it an object or is it the sys
ID? Or an array of JSON stuff.
Yeah, and also note, like for the create, because this is what insert does, is it returns the sys ID, and so on the create things I'm returning. This is really kind of redundant, but I might want to be able to. The whole reason I'm doing it this way is I might want to stop it in the debugger and be able to look at it. So, all right. So given that, now what I want to do is given a test, the sys ID of a test, I want to create the standards, and I'm not going to worry about any parameters at this point. Step names, and we're just going to create an array of the step config names of everything we want. And I think we're going to want 6. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. And so let's go to my reverse engineer test. And let's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's do those 7. We're just going to do those same 7. This may not be the best, but it's where we're going to start. Okay. So we'll start with impersonate. And this. So impersonate.
Next is open a new form.
Yeah, open a new form. Thank you. If you can remember one ahead, then open a new. Here's something I don't know. If I do a name search, is it case sensitive by default?
I think so.
The glide record, I believe, is not.
Because
it's using the same as the list filter, which is not.
It's probably under. It's probably however MySQL is, which I think MySQL is.
Oh, that's a good point.
Not. I don't know. Set field. Like if you're using Oracle is for sure case sensitive on text queries. MySQL may not be. I'm not 100% sure, actually. This is a testable hypothesis, but I'm not going to test it right now. Submit a form.
At least we're not going to test it intentionally.
We may, yes. We may end up testing it against our will, and that happens sometimes. Open an existing record. What I am subject to here, because I'm not cutting and pasting, I am subject to typos. So if we get a null in the middle of here, that's probably what happened. Open an existing record. Field values validation.
Wait, you got open a new existing record.
Open an existing. That would have been number 1. Field values validation. Field state validation. Yep.
Whoa.
That was a stray.
Stray finger on the cursor key.
Stray cursor. Field values. Which way did I want? Field values validation. This doesn't really matter that much. Which order? Field state. Okay.
Well, now what I want to matter, because the order here is going to be the order of the steps.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. Like you can test those in either order. It's not the most crucial part of it. So now we've got that array. What I want to do is now let's figure out in my step config over here in my test step the description. I'm not going to worry about the description right now. I'm not 100% sure.
Generated by Dave script. That's my description.
Well, I'm not 100% sure if that thing won't actually generate it for me anyway.
I think it actually might. I think it's going to do that automatically.
Because it does that. Like this right here, it's all dynamic, right?
Yep.
So it might do that. I don't know if that's a business. What I don't know is if the UI does this. And since we're going around the UI, and just a little bit of backstory, I considered talking to the ATF team, and then I decided not to because I thought really there was two reasons. One is I kind of wanted the pure experience for this, but really more importantly, I thought they might try to talk me out of this. So I didn't want to hear about how terrible an idea was because it's sort of kind of a terrible idea. But because God knows there may be a lot of stuff. But you'll notice when we get down the data model, there's a lot of stuff to keep together. So, this is where I'm kind of playing on the strength of ServiceNow, which is that every, it's database records all the way down, right? Mm-hmm. Everything you look at is a database record of some other table, including the table is a database record of the table. So it's all records in the database. And so if you guys if you see me doing something that you think is, against or for kind of best practice, because I know that like Chuck, you talk to people who are doing this sort of thing. And like my take is always as long as you're not doing something like with the system tables where you're going to mess it up. Right. Kind of we'll give you the best advice we can, but Godspeed, you're kind of on your own. But we also do tell people that this is, every table in the system is queryable.
Just a table, yeah.
So you can do a query. If you need to look up an esoteric thing from the audit log, you can do that if you're willing to pay the runtime price.
Mm-hmm.
So we're kind of in that here. So, okay. All that said, so I'm going to be looking up those step configs, and let me see what I'm trying to figure out the very minimal thing I can put in here to make sense. Let's just do name and step config and see if that's good enough. Okay, so
it's got a display value on it, so yeah, you should be able to. If it's referenceable by that, you could do a get.
Yeah, let's start with that. So what we're going to do, and I'm going to even be more explicit than an I here for counter 0 counter less than step names dot length counter plus plus. I came so close to just typing I out of habit right there. What we want to do for each one of those things is we want to get the actual step config.
Yep.
So var step config equals, and here's another thing. I have done this more than once in here. I did not precede it with the get with the this.
Oh, I know. Especially if you convert a whole bunch of standalone functions into a script include.
Yeah,
it's so easy to miss.
Counter. So we're just gonna get the step config for this
Yep.
part of the array. We're going to loop over. We're going to, given that we got the step config, we're going to set up the JSON we want to pass in.
Rather than making it specific to get step config by name, couldn't we just make a version of get object? You're getting an object by ID before out of a table.
We can. What we want to do, we could. Yeah, but let's think about factoring that for later.
Okay.
We might be able to make this more generic. What we need to do is kind of do for the query. We need to kind of do the same thing, because what if we're querying on two things? So up here, like we have this hard-coded thing where we know that sysid. So this right here is like right now is a hard-coded thing where I know I'm looking for name. We would need to factor that out and maybe loop over to JSON and add queries just the exact same way we're doing that in the create.
I've seen people abstract the glide record stuff into 1,000 different ways. So yeah, I get it.
So, and if we do that, what we would do is just, abstract that and then create the JSON and et cetera, et cetera. I leave this API here, and then it would call the generic thing, which we might very well factor that. Var values So so this is where we got to line up because we are actually passing the table names. We want the display name to be the step config name, which also could be, we could just make it simple and say, and is that display underscore name, right? Display underscore name. We could make it well. So here's one of those things, and this is also another one of those like arbitrary things that drives me crazy. But it probably makes more sense to be consistent, right? Is that I've got this thing right here should be the same as the name from it. Does it matter where in the heck I get the name from?
No.
I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to pick the thing that makes it most obvious.
And keep it consistent within that list because you're putting them all in. Yep. Line them up.
Because I am going to be doing other step config things.
Yep.
So let's just get everything, even though I just looked it up by the same name and they have to be identical or I wouldn't have pulled it out of the database. I'm just going to do that. What else do I need to get? I need to get sys name is the same thing. And again, it might possibly populate that on its own.
Curious to know what you're going to do when you get to the scope.
For now, I'm going to leave it empty. And I think it will automatically do whatever scope I'm in.
I think you're right. Yep. Also, on your line 28, there is a missing S in the step name.
Step names. Very good. Thank you, sir. Display name, sysname. What else? Oh, I'm going to need somewhere in here. I've got to be step config. SysID of the step config. Or this will not be very successful. All right. So this is what, and so we're going to end up doing this pattern a lot, right? We're going to have, we're going to be doing a lot of setting these relationships. So I could do SysID, or I could do get unique value.
Value, yeah.
Unique value. And do I need to specifically set the display value? Is that going to automatically populate by setting this? Let's not do it and see what happens. How about that?
Yeah, I think just by populating that, you should be okay. I'm pretty sure.
All right. And at this point, so
do you want to do a get value for those other two?
I can, just to be consistent. If we're going to do more so than anything, consistency.
It's just one of those things that it keeps coming back to bite me. If I'm putting an object into something else and I assume it's going to be a string and it's not.
Yeah, and if we're using the API here, why not use the API here? So okay. So we've done all that. So this is per that step name. Let's go ahead and just create that thing. Oh, we need there's another big thing that I'm missing, which is that step config has to point to a test.
Oh, got it. That would make sense.
Again,
who's the parent? Yep.
If I don't do that, big problem.
And that'd be the test ID parameter that you just sent in?
And that is the test field. Yes, that would be the one that'll be test ID up there. Okay. And now let us see if this is enough. So we're going to kind of go for broke. We're going to actually do 7 of these things the first time we try it. And then from here, we're going to create system object. And let's get var equals create this dot create system object. And we did not explicitly appoint somebody to look at the chat. Is one of you gentlemen looking at the chats periodically?
I am keeping an eye on that.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. And this exact table name is sysATF step.
Yep.
And then we're going to pass in the values.
Wait a minute. Wait.
Whoa.
Hang on. Go.
No. Okay.
What did you get above when you got step config? Isn't that a glide record?
Step config is a glide record. Yes.
Okay, and now you're making a step based on the step config.
Step config is this thing.
Yep. Yep.
And a step is the instantiated concrete version. This is kind of like the abstract.
Gotcha. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. I got it.
So now we're doing that, and now let's just log it to the window. Let's say, I don't know, step. I'm regretting my decision to not create a variable for this earlier, which might have made sense if I was going to reference it this many times. SysID. We'll just name and SysID for each thing that we stick in there. All right, just to verify that it's happening.
That makes sense.
Now we've got our create test steps. Let's go ahead and do a create template. And for now, I'm not going to bother passing in anything. In the future, we would pass in a form, and then we would do some introspection off that. For right now, we're just going to do this. So step one, we're going to create test. Test. Again, this needs to be a this. And var test equals this create test. We need a name, and
you got an extra T on this.
This
fist.
Var name equals test A. Equals is testing. Okay. Name description.
Mm-hmm.
That's as much to just make it, again, just to make it obvious to everybody watching what we're doing as anything. Then we're going to create. And so create test returns the SysID. Okay. Just want to make sure. Create test steps. Test steps. Pass in the SysID that we just got.
You needed this on that too.
Yes, I do.
If this, then that.
And we're just going to call that good. All right. Let me save this. I've got the debugger on. I think let's just go for broke on this. And so what am I doing? I want to, did I call this? I just wrote it. Create test.
Create template.
Create template. Yes.
Create template was your test function.
Yeah. And I guess I could have parameterized that, but all right. And let's just run it. See if we don't get, go ahead and we've got some, we are in here. Out of curiosity, let's step just long enough to see if this runs through a little bit without dying. Let's step over. Do we have a step config? I want to.
I think you want.
I've got a bunch of leftover. Leftover breakpoints. I should probably get rid of most of them. We actually have a step config.
Ooh, it's got stuff in it.
It's got stuff in it. That's a good sign. Blah blah. Setting it. This is just simply.
And the name down there says impersonate, so it's the right step config.
Even better than a random one. All right. We have not blown up anything yet. SysID. Is our var SysID populated? It is populated with something. We're going to GS info. Let's continue. Actually, that won't do any point until I get rid of this breakpoint. Let's get rid of that and then continue. And should be done. Are we still waiting on somebody?
It looks like you jumped back out to. Oh, because there's still a breakpoint. I think it's on the it's technically trying to execute line 28. Yeah, and then it's jumping into your function.
Here's something that I would like is a get rid of every breakpoint.
Yeah.
In the debugger.
Like clear all breakpoints.
I don't think you get this. Oh, okay.
Can I?
Just label the button. Shut up and run.
There we go. All right.
Ooh.
I see.
Ow,
bummer.
ow.
Table name cannot be null. Okay, so let us see.
Somewhere
Step one.
got a table name.
Let's see how far we got. We got test A. Does testing script include? Did it get anything?
Ooh, we got a lot
look
of
at that.
things.
It got a lot of things. Look
That
at
looks pretty nice.
that. Does look nice, doesn't it? Holy guacamole. That's actually not too shabby.
I like the
is there
description too.
Yeah, the description.
Description
Open
of field-
a new undefined form. Open a
Yeah.
new undefined form. No, we're getting close.
This doesn't surprise me at all, because what we didn't do is configure what the form is. So,
Yep.
and we didn't configure what we're impersonating. So,
Right.
in fact, the fact that it made an attempt, so essentially, it's calling that function that we have seen before, the whatever it's called, generate description,
Yeah.
something like that, ATF. It's calling that on it. It's using everything that it has, which in this case is none of this information exists.
So there's parameters we need to send to each step config, so we get the steps configured properly.
That's correct. So what we're going to do is we're not going to be, we either are going to have to, so this thing right here, like this generic thing right here, either we create a more complex thing where this is like a JSON object of a thing and parameters, which we might do, or because the alternative is like 7 functions. And I'm trying to keep this as generic as possible, with as few. I don't want to have a create impersonate step if I can get away from that. I want to do as many generic things as I can. So what I'd rather do, if I could, was do something more like this, where this is the stops being an array, and this becomes, let's say, a hash of this. JSON object where it's this is the key mapping to another hash. You can see the old aging Perl programmer in me when I do this, right? Is so impersonate, and then the parameters to the impersonate, like the specific parameters to the impersonate. That is a possibility. I'm open for discussion on where to proceed from that, because one way or another, we got to crack this egg, right? One way or another, the information that goes to the individual steps has to exist.
Right.
We're going to complicate something. We either complicate this data structure, we complicate the code as a whole.
I really like data structure driven functionality. So if you were to, I like the approach you were talking about a second ago, so do the key values thing, or if you want even more flexibility, you could still make it an array, but make it an array of objects. And so then an object key would be step name or something like that. And then you have object keys for your other stuff.
I'm going to throw a wrench into the architecture and say, why wouldn't we just, you already made a sample test that you could base this script off of. Why wouldn't we just do something like add a checkbox to the test and say, hey, I'm a template, and then have a clone feature from there that you can just clone the test and the steps. That way you make 2 or 3 templates and say, clone this one, clone that one. Now I've got my boilerplate. This script becomes a matter of just going through the record and its subpieces and copying those values. It's going to look similar, but it's going to be data driven at that point. That
to
if
do
I want
that,
to make
so you want to come over here and say, like template check.
Yeah. Which
okay,
puts
well,
up
that
a clone
involves,
UI action or something. But it's
you
going to be the
could
same.
do that. It would be possible to do that. That would be going in and modifying the ATF system itself.
You're already in the global scope, dude.
But I'm not modifying anything. I'm not modifying the test framework itself. I'm not modifying anything. I'm sitting on top of it. I'm not actually altering the ATF.
Oh, wait a minute. We already have a copy test in there. What are we trying to do that doesn't do?
What this doesn't do is this doesn't introspect the form.
Oh, okay.
Which is ultimately where we're going to get.
Gotcha. That's the value we're adding here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I would suspect that even if you were to kind of, if you were to go the template route, if you tried to come up with some kind of template form, then there's still going to be some point where you have to have enough richness in the data structure to be able to control it in other ways. So I guess that,
So now let's go through here and kind of figure out, now the alternate argument for maybe doing this function by function is like the form. So this part, this will be a parameter, right? Because either, one of the things I thought about was maybe creating a UI action that would, if you have, say, one of the test roles would show on a form, something like that. That would be create a test case. Alternately, it might just be like a create test UI type thing where you pick from the forms. I don't know. It could 601 half dozen of the other for that, as far as I'm concerned. But one way or another, you have identified a form that's going to be, you've got a sysid of a form. We're going to go from there.
Do we also want to specify a view name, because forms can have multiple views? Okay, so when we get to that point,
right? So if we if we got the sysid of the form, that will be the one, right? Because the form and the view will have a sysid, right? So it'll be the sysid basically of the view.
Yep.
That's what we'll have. So from there, we would come through somewhere in there, like the next thing. So we might, what time is it? 5:05. We could maybe start doing that now. So we've got some kind of error in here. I'm not even sure if it's worth the time to debug this right now. Something, table name can't be null. And I think this may literally be because the test that we're trying to generate, I think the field state may not create without the parameters that we're not passing it.
Well, and I also wonder, because of all of the dynamic description generation, if there's underlying code that's also going out there and it's trying to generate a description, and then it's saying, hey, go and look at, so it's...
Yeah, see, this is in fact the problem, because this is a required value that we didn't pass in. So I'm not going to worry about that. That'll take care of itself when we do this other stuff. So now let's go back through. So now we need to do some of the form helper stuff. So I've got to name a thing. Get
utility function 6.
What's the James Gang Joe Walsh song? The funk number 5 or whatever it is.
Mambo number 5.
Funk number 9. One of those ones. Clearly had a working title that they just never bothered to replace. So we want to. So
what is it going to do?
We're going to take the form. We're going to take the form sysid. So this just gets the object. We want to, let's say, get form fields. Let's call it that.
That makes sense.
And I'm trying to be extremely explicit about what things are sysids and what are not. This is almost like I'm reinventing extremely old wheels. I almost like what do you call it? Is it RPN? Something like that. There's some format where you always have the return value, like the return type is always encoded in the function name. I can't remember.
Oh, right. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, though.
Didn't Pascal, wasn't that like the convention of Pascal and stuff like that? Okay. So get form fields. So given this form, so step 1, we want to get the form. Get form object gr. And I realized too that this is like object gr is probably one bit of redundancy too much. Needs to be of this. If it's the object, I probably don't need gr as well. Right, get form gr does enough. So get the form. Now we're going to do another query on. Let's find us a form. One of our favorites. I've basically been doing everything on. Do we not? Is that not a thing that we have? Oh, there it is. Let's do incident because it's just so well understood and it's such a great. So this is what I was saying before, is like this sysid, Chuck, is the default view. And if you were,
but there should be multiple views for incident. There should be default, self-service, ITIL. There's multiple out-of-box forms. So I don't know if we're on the right table yet.
Well, so if you, for example, so if you change that to table equals incident, so we see everything with table equals incident, I think we should get multiple results.
He's already got it sorted.
So is there just one view?
Not on incident, out of the box. Guarantee it.
All right.
I don't know. Oh yeah. Well, there should be self-service.
I smell a wager.
Hmm.
There's a self-service list view.
Huh?
There's a self-service view.
I think the rule here says because there's no. They may have converted that to view rule, so you can't switch it.
Got it.
Okay. So I do see the self-service view.
Oh, because you hit it from self-service incidents, go down to incident open or incidents all. There you go. Huh.
All right. Let's not get too.
You might have to open an existing one before you'll see the views.
Okay. I'm not gonna worry about that too much. What I want to do is just, given the incident form. That's not what I want. No, that is what I want. Oops. Given the incident form sections. Now what I want to do is navigate from here. Let's just look at it here. Yeah, see, there's a bunch of them in here. UI views.
That's what you can choose from. But out of the box, you've got like mobile and metric and self-service and even service portal view.
Okay.
Yeah, I usually start, when I do this investigation, I usually start at SysUI view.
Let's try that. And so the other thing about this, you'll notice the
empty is the default view, which don't ever specify default view as the default view.
So I'm not, what I want to do is, does this UI view have table as part of it?
It doesn't until you get down to the form, but you have to say which view you want first.
So, all right. So what am I navigating to from here?
Click empty at the top. That's your default view. If you want to know all the views that are available to incident, see, here's your tables down here. These are all the tables that have a default view, which should be just about all of them.
Okay. So what is this going to take me to that's different than what I was looking at a minute ago? Is this so?
Hover over one. That's SysUI form.
Mm-hmm.
But you could also go through SysUI view to get to say ESS, which will take you to the SysUI form or incident ESS. It's a combination. You got to have the view and the table.
But doesn't the form just reference a view? So in other words, the form is still the form. It's just associated with a view.
Right. Just like what you see here.
All right. So if we know what the form is, then we should still be able to then go and.
So what I'm going to need to do,
why didn't we see other views from SysUI form?
You know what? Okay, so I'm digging as well. If you look at form sections, go to
SysUI section.
Yeah, SysUI section.
Yep.
And then, for example, you can look for SysUI section for incident.
Nope, wrong thing.
And you'll find every table, every view.
Right. So the section is what is referencing that self-service view, interestingly.
Yeah, that makes sense. It says this section goes on this form.
Yeah.
And this view of the form.
So it might be, I think that the section might be the thing that we have to actually.
I think so too. I think that's going to be your base table. Rather than walking down, to use a bad term, you're going to dot walk up. If you give it the table and the view, you can use SysUI section to get the right sections for that form and view.
What I worry about and what I suspect might be the case, though, is that there might be some weird, unholy combination of both. The section and the form, because otherwise.
No, they should be unique because you can't have the same section on two forms. So a group by view on that list. I'll show you. Group by view.
All right.
Oh, you got table greater than equals. Okay, I thought it was equals. But if you open up, make it is incident. There's your views for incident. Okay, so if you open those up, it says, the default view has 4 sections. Your main section, which is section 0, and then these other ones, notes, related records, and resolution information. This is what you see out of the box. If I were to add another tab or another section, I'd get another section here. So to get all of the bits and pieces, you need the information out of all 4 of those records. Say, these are the fields on this entire form.
Yes, this is correct. However, so that versus this incident, that's the same. This is the same thing.
That's the same, but just for the default view. We didn't see any other views. Right.
Correct.
That's what confuses me is why a SysUI form, if I said, show me the mobile view through SysUI form, you're not going to find it.
Right. So we're going to be probably initiating this from a UI action on the form, right? So the form will know what form it's on. So it will be passing that sysid, right? So if we're on a form and we say, create templated test for this form, we'll be able to figure out what form we're on. In fact, we have to figure that out because that's where we're starting from. Okay. So from that point, that would be this thing, right? So if we were on the form and we're looking at the current form that we're on, we would start here, and it would include the view. So it would get to whatever this is. I don't know why we're not seeing them all, but let's assume that if we're on the ESS, it would be that one, right?
We're going to do a test on that.
Yeah. So at that point, what we want to do is, given whatever form we're on, we want to basically get these sections for the form, these sections whose parent basically is the form that we came from.
Yep.
So, given the form that we just looked up, and that's boop, boop, boop. So basically this thing. So we want sys. This is where, so I've been doing so much of this stuff in the last 24 hours. A lot of looking, and this is why I do the XML, right? Is because it's got the table name, it's got all the, because the XML gives you a very literal view of the columns underneath it. So what we really want to do is we want to get all the form sections for that form. We want to loop over them. And then we're never going to have a element on the screen that's not in a section. So
correct.
It has to, minus a section, you got nothing to be contained on. So it's that's got to work, right? And let's just do this var. Now we're going to do what I don't have is a is there a generic? I'm not going to worry about making this generic right now. What we want to do, actually, let me go ahead and copy and paste this so that I can refer back to it.
And I may have a theory, by the way, on why there's only one incident form. So I was looking through, and it looks like anytime there's a form that has multiple sections, there's a form. But if the form only has one section, there's no form record. So
that's interesting. That would be a problem then.
Well, it appears that what's happening is that the form is there to arrange, basically to control the order that the sections show up in.
And you don't need it if there's only one section.
Yeah, because there are other tables that do have multiple forms, and every one of those tables that has an actual form record has multiple sections with a position index, basically. So I think that's the difference.
All right. So what I'm going to do before I get too wrapped up in this, maybe what we should do is do this now. Let's do just a dumb UI action. Let's create a UI action.
Okay.
Let's save this guy before I leave this. We'll save this, leave him where we are. Action. And let's make it extremely dumb. Let's call it form
info.
Something. That's a good one. Okay.
Global.
global.
Or actually, okay, I see what you're saying. Well, yeah, because you don't want to show up on multiple forms, right? At this point.
I want it to actually be on the form record itself.
Oh, okay, got it.
I don't want it to be. So then let's say, let's just make it a button, action name, form, info, and my form is, and let's just do, what should I do here? Current dot table. Is there an is that dot get value? Is there the possibility if we go and look at that? But I guess what we're saying is, so if we're looking at like the ESS, maybe we do want this in global. Because do we want to be able to look at any, from the use case of the person who's creating these tests, do we want to just be able to look at any form and say, I want to test this thing I'm looking at right now?
Yeah, that's what I thought you were going.
Okay. So in this case, so now this is going to tell us about the record, but not.
Yeah, so you would have to start querying at that point. I think there is there a current dot like get view name or something like that?
There's get table name. I thought there was get view name as well. Let me check real quick.
Because I think
in a business rule,
right,
or in a UI action. Will this auto
server side nonetheless?
If we do current though, it's not going to know. Like if we tell it current, it's not going to know anything about that, right?
Well, it should know.
Sure. Or if we tell it global.
Well, so in the case of a UI action, global, I believe, is just controlling where it's going to show up, and I believe at that point, current should be the current record, whatever glide record that is currently associated with.
That's what I'm saying, but it's not going to autocomplete anything for me.
Oh, I got what you're saying. Okay, right.
Let's just pick any. Let's set it to incident for a second.
Returns the name of the view in use. There is a get view name. It's not glide record. It is. One in render properties.
Was it RP? Interesting.
And there's three hits.
Get record class name. How about that?
That'll be the.
No, that'll be the inserted. That'll be the record itself.
Yeah, like incident, change, problem, etc. Because of the table extension thing. I do know that it's a URL parameter generally. So if there's no URL parameter, it's not there, and it's the default view. Otherwise, it's sysparm view. We could do. You do an rp.get parameter. Was it rp.get parameter value? Will that do it?
Is it capital RP?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I'll be curious to see if this actually works in this context, because I know this works in UI pages. I don't know what's going to happen here.
Yeah, I've had varying luck when it works and when it doesn't.
All right, so let's just go.
Do you want current get table name for that dude? Because not every table has a table.
Let's just put that in here. How about that?
Inside of it, you need to specify your parameter name.
What's the parameter I'm looking for?
Sysparm underscore view.
Parm underscore view. And that will be a sysid, or that'll
be a
name of it. Okay.
Yeah. If it's empty, it's going to be default. Otherwise, I'll say ESS or ITIL or mobile.
Okay. And what are you complaining about? Expecting. Let's see.
Just keep adding parentheses till it goes away.
Until it looks like some Lisp.
Yeah, that's not it. I think this is the problem. Okay. And form button, we're showing it on, put it back to global. And let's just...
You want to do a GS info or an add info message just so we don't have to go running to the logs?
All right, let's do that.
Terrible way of debugging, but don't look now, kids.
Sometimes the terrible way is the good way.
All right. Form info. Let's just do it for the form we're on.
Sure.
My form is sys UI action.
That's the table. That's your unique ID value, but we did put a label in front of the anyway. But see, do you have another view for UI actions? Open up your UI action that you were just on. You do have views. There you go. All right. Change views and see what it says.
Are there views?
There's a view. Oh, no. Darn.
So we'd have to go to a incident or something.
Yeah, try incident or sysuser. Those are my two favorites when I want to just mess with views. Here's a quick reminder, kids. If you do incident.list in that little nav, it'll bring up the list. If you do capital.list, it comes up in a new tab.
All right, form info.
So it's not
yeah, see, that didn't turn up anything there.
What view were you on, though? Weren't you on you're on default view, so it's going to still be blank. Go in there, change the view, and then do it. And ESS. There you go. If it's blank, it's the default view. That's the gotcha.
Okay. So RP.get parameter value does work. Interesting.
And the only record I can find in the entire system that is not a 32-digit hex number is the default view, which has a sysid of default view.
Interesting.
Some of the I guess they're not sysids, but like the actions a lot of times, like that action name will be the parameter that gets called a lot of times.
Yeah.
Which can be confusing because you think that it's just kind of this minor thing, but if you name the thing weird, then it can make weird things happen. Okay, so I think we're going to stop there. So actually the creating of this stuff was as is typical, right? The creating of these things was easier than I thought it was going to be, including the fact that the step configs kind of populate themselves.
Yep.
And I thought that was going to be hard. I thought that was going to be a big deal, getting all that stuff together. This guy is not going to create minus anything because, like we said, it has a required value that just doesn't work without it. So that's why it threw the error. But the 6 of the 7 kind of work without it. Probably what I will do is refactor to what we were talking about before, where this will be, I'm not just going to pass a simple name. I'm going to pass a JSON object. I'm going to have to, this will kind of be me tinkering by myself, is I'm going to have to spend a little time abstracting out what it is I'm going to pass in there. And that's going to involve getting back over here. Just if we look at, say, the field validation, we're going to start having to mess with these sys variables. Which
that'll be week 3.
Whew, let me tell you, it was tricky to even figure out. This is the thing where I said, if somebody's going to tell me that this is a bad idea, it would be around this kind of stuff, because these sys variables are unusual, and really the only two things in the whole system that use them are workflows and ATF. So I was trying to reverse engineer this a little bit, where what's happening here is, just to show you like an actual populated test. If you look at, say, my reverse engineer test, in the impersonate, like this over here is, we're picking ATF user.
Yep.
So that's the variable down here. And the sys variable value, that is this. We're saying this is the value that's going into a sys variable value. And somewhere in here, this guy is saying that it's coming from sys user, I think. So the variable, the value, and I think this is the sys user table, and this is the record of the sys user. So that's where it gets, or vice versa. Maybe the variable, this is the sys user table. One of these two is the actual record, and one of these two is a pointer to the table record itself. Mm-hmm. That's where it gets really weird. And so once we get down to populating this stuff, it's going to be kind of funky. And so this might take a little. This is probably stuff that doesn't lend itself necessarily to doing real time, because it may not. There may be more than an hour in figuring out how exactly you deal with this stuff.
You might have an embedded object inside of your JSON object for each one of those parameters.
Yeah, no, you absolutely do. So this is why, like, showing the XML actually is the best thing, because this sys variable value is the embedded value. That is this value. And so this whole thing, this is a very kind of indirect loopity-loop thing here. Like I said, this is the table, the record in the table, which I think is variable, and then the value is, so ATF user is, I think, dia 8, and this is the record of the table. So so at this point, I'm gonna stop sharing. We're gonna call it here, and this will be a thing that I kind of go off on my own and work on for a while. I don't know, how long it's going to take. I don't know, I don't know how much time I'm going to have to spend on it. It's going to be one of those things where this might be a longer term project.
You sound like a kid who's going from high school but doesn't know when he wants to start college. I'm going to go find myself. It might take a week. It might take 2 years.
One of the things that I did do, so I started an update set when I began this, because I am in global space, right? So I did this as if you guys, I realized I just stopped my share. So I started a update set. So everything is living in its own update set so that it would be postable to share in the future. And ultimately, like, if this gets to something working where you can actually generate these templates, then, that's the ultimate destination for it, is I want to post it up onto share. So the idea being that somewhere in here, we would have some combination of this and like one UI action. And then where that form info is right here, then that would just be a generate the boilerplate tests for this form, and then it would create, something for, it would create like 8 different assertions, and then you just go through, and you probably only want 2, but you click. Basically reducing the friction of setting up the test, because that's one of those things where, we're kind of, much like debugging, right? Where you debug the most proximate problem, and then now you can get to the next problem, which was blocked by the earlier, have an exception that doesn't let you get to the other problem. We've got this great test framework, but it is not necessarily low friction to set up. And so if we can ease that pain, then that makes it that much easier for people to do it. And if people can set up, if we can say setting up, all your commonly used forms is a 1-day work instead of 2 weeks work, then, it's more likely it's going to happen. So there you go. All right, gentlemen, what is your beer ratings? But are these, both of you got new to you beers, right?
New to me. Yep.
Okay. What's your beer rating, Chuck?
The Barrio Blonde Ale, I'm going to give it a 3 3/4. It's a nice ale. It's a yellow beer, but it's full-bodied.
All right. Josh?
And the Laser Snake from Three Floyds with the awesome shiny thing. It's a solid 4. It's a really good IPA. It's I like it.
All right, and there was no doubt in my mind. Purple Haze 4.5. I knew that was going in. It's both. I love it. Plus, it's a nostalgic beer. So there you go.
Nice.
All right, friends. Don't know what we'll do next week. It could be part 2 of this. It could be something completely different. Actually, is next week. It'll be 2 weeks when we probably won't do the show, or at least Josh and I won't do the show. Next week we probably should be on. So there you go. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining, and we will catch you next time. Enjoy your weekend.
Bye.
See y'all.
And happy Durga Puja.